You're listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner, your source for investing made easy. Here's Andy Tanner.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. This is where we do our very best to make investing simple. And I'm just thrilled to invite back to the program Richard Vague. And if you remember, Richard is the author of an illustrated history of American business. And today we're going to talk about his new book called The Case for a Debt Jubilee. And this is going to be about private debt. Richard has a tremendous background. If I went through his whole history, I'll let him give a bit of his background, but it's extensive. And what I love about Richard is he's data-driven. So with that, Richard Vague, welcome back to the program. It's great to have you back.
Well, it's a real privilege to be here. You have a great show, and I feel honored to be part of it.
This is going to be great. Why don't you give just a little bit of your background and what brought you to write this particular book?
Well, you're nice to ask. I was in the private sector. I was the CEO of a consumer bank, actually two different consumer banks that I started and grew to rather large national institutions. Then I got into the energy business for a while, and electricity and natural gas. And right in the middle of all of this, of course, we had the '08 crisis. And it got me deeply interested in understanding the causes of that crisis. And then, it's been over a decade since that crisis, really to understand kind of the doldrums that came after that crisis. So all of that led us to what is now about 15 years of very deep research on debt, which is, again, where I spent a big part of my career. And that's led us to books like this Debt Jubilee book, which we're very excited about.
Now, the last time you and I spoke, we spoke a lot about MMT. We spoke a lot about government debt. We talked a lot about government spending and the amount of debt that was taken on and the amount of money, frankly, that was printed, because of COVID-19. We were printing a lot anyway. But this book is really on private debt. So can you, and you are so data-driven, can you start with some of the numbers that you've seen in terms of how our private debt has grown because of the pandemic?
Well, yes. What most folks don't focus on is the fact that private sector debt, which is the debt of businesses and households, is far larger than government debt. Right now, private sector debt is over 160% of GDP. Government debt is less than 130% of GDP. So it's a bigger number. And when you put it in historical context, the number is even more striking because right after World War II, private debt got as low as 35% of GDP, and now it's 160% of GDP. So more than triple, almost a quadrupling of the amount of debt that the average household and average business is carrying, and frankly, in many cases, struggling with.
Let's talk about the different kinds of debt. I like debt, particularly in real estate. I think that there's great tax advantages in real estate, and I like the leverage. However, Warren Buffett has, I don't know if it was Warren Buffett, but it's often attributed to him that he says, hey, when the tide goes out, that's when you can see who's swimming naked. And if you have too much debt, you can get caught swimming naked. From a investment debt standpoint, if I'm a private investor and I'm just going to go out and acquire some real estate, doesn't an inflationary environment helps me because I'm essentially shorting the dollar when I borrow it. And so if I believe that inflation will be there over a period of 30, 20 years, to me, debt would make a lot of sense. But we also have some deflationary pressures to where I could be paying that money back in dollars that are worth more, which would be the opposite effect. Do you have any comments you can give us on investment debt, the dangers and levels that may have, and whether we have inflation or deflation? Because to me, I think that's a great way to short the dollar.
I call it the paradox of debt. And I think it's an extremely important concept. Debt can be very good, and debt can also be very bad. So you know, it's up to us as individuals to manage our own debt positions. So I agree with you completely that debt is an appropriate tool to use in investing in assets, especially real estate. Frankly, we have about $35 trillion in debt in the United States. I would say probably 16 or 17 trillion of that is real estate. About 11 trillion is household mortgages, 6 trillion plus is commercial real estate debt of some type. So it is a very effective tool, but you have to be cautious. I think the times that we get into trouble is when there's an over-reliance on debt. You know, there's a difference between a project financed at, 20% down payment and 0% down payment. So we as individuals, I think, can make practical decisions about that. Now, as it relates to inflation, I want to make one comment that has more to do with housing and real estate than anything. And that is, I want to kind of set inflation aside for the moment. At the peak in 2007, let's call it, the housing inventory in the United States was 2.7 million unsold homes. Before the boom in housing, the housing inventory was 1.8 million homes. Today, the housing inventory is 1.3 million homes. It's historically speaking, if you adjust for population size, it's at the lowest level it's been in forever, maybe ever. And so, in one sense, I think there's going to be healthy demand for housing for quite some time. The run-up in prices we've seen now has no similarity to what we saw in 06 and 07. So if I were going to try to put forward a belief about the housing market, I think it's going to continue to be a good market for some time.
Talk to me a little bit about income inequality and inequality in general. We had a bit of a discussion about that the last time we were here. Who are the winners and who are the losers, and how is this affecting different people at different incomes?
We have seen a multi-decade-long increase in inequality, and we see this happening really in concert with the growth in debt. So government debt and private debt is growing. We're able to break the U.S. population down into quintiles due to the great work of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. And we can see that, let's call it the bottom 60% of the U.S. population in terms of income. We look from 1989 to the present, their debt burden to their income has increased by 76%. Their net worth as a percent of income has actually declined. It's increased in real dollars. It has not increased in time-adjusted dollars, if you will. The opposite is true for the top 10%, let's call it. Their debt to their income is only up about 12%, whereas their net worth is up about 250%. So the difference could hardly be more dramatic. And I think even in this, there's a certain irony in all the government support that's occurred over the last couple of years, because a lot of that, the $1,400 checks and the $1,200 checks, really end up in the hands of the folks that already have it. It's people going out and, I heard an anecdote from a John Deere dealer in Missouri, and this is in the middle of the farm country, and they had an $1,100 tractor that is primarily used for lawn care, and it was listed for about $1,100. And when the $1,400 checks came out, they increased the price to $1,400, sold out, and had a backlog of 16 months. They said, we never sold so many $1,400 tractors.
To me, I hear stories like that and I shake my head. It's like, oh, COVID-19, I think I'll go buy me a tractor. There you go. That's what everybody needs.
Yep. So, it just shows that even this most recent stimulus contributed to the inequality. It pushed up asset prices, and so those are the folks that are the haves. So we've seen the pattern repeat itself.
How do the lower income people carry this burden? I mean, how is there often policy and demographics can help us chart the future. We see a group of people or a quintile or quartile of people in a certain situation. We see a policy. Often, you look at the movie or the book, The Big Short. I don't know if those guys were geniuses in figuring out the timing or if they were lucky, because a lot of people might have had the same idea and just timed it wrong. But can you give us any type of time frame to where this becomes unsustainable and we start to see a change that, at the macro level because of this private debt?
Well, I think we've actually been seeing it since the 2008 crisis. I think the fact that folks carry so much debt these days means that their spending is not as robust as it otherwise would be. Folks that would be spending for vacations or new cars or sending their kid to college are instead having to divert that money to pay down interest and principal on their debt. So I think that's what we're going to continue to see, kind of as this fiscal support from Congress kind of disappears, as it essentially now has. Yeah. That's what my new book is about. It's called The Case for Debt Jubilee. It goes in and tries to put forward ideas for debt relief, you might call it, for student loans, mortgage loans, healthcare debt, and the like. And I'll just give one example, and that is student debt, which has been such huge. A lightning rod here lately.
Yeah.
Student debt has gone from, I think 10 years ago it was less than 500 million, and today it's 1.8 trillion.
Yeah, it's closing in on 2. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
No, I was saying it's closing in on 2 trillion. You're right. I mean, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And, a lot of politicians have put forward the idea of, let's just wipe it all out, which is popular to some people, but to other folks it feels unfair because, how I've spent the last 10 years scrimping and saving to pay for my kids' college. The guy across the street didn't. He has debt. You're going to forgive that, and I get nothing. So you have the element of fairness. So the program that I put forward tries to address that by saying, for folks that do bona fide community service of a certain number of hours, and I'm proposing 800 hours, and make 8 years worth of payments, they would have their student debt forgiveness. So somebody who's really willing to put in the kind of service volunteer hours, we want to reach out and try to help them. It's a way for someone to get relief beyond just paying their loan in full.
It is interesting. Let's talk about this for a moment and before we move off of student loans. When I had a friend of mine who did, he did a lot. He's an economist. He's kind of a macro guy. He consults with the IMF, and he made an interesting term. He said, Andy, I'm not so sure we haven't moved from capitalism to creditism, meaning that by credit expansion is the only way to keep growth in the economy. Meaning that, if I'm an entrepreneur and I have a product or service, one of the ways I can enable people to buy that is by offering financing or helping them with terms. Credit gives people buying power that they would not have had, and therefore gives us consuming power. And when that happens, you mentioned the 06, 07 buildup of the real estate bubble. Those low rates, those loans enabled people to buy maybe more house than maybe some of them should have. I think it enabled predatory loans to be able to occur. Does that happen with tuition? Is the fact we are going to be so aggressive in financing it, does that raise tuition? That's question number one. And then number two, if I go to a bank and I want a home, at least there's collateral. And it's usually someone has a job. Now, a student loan to me would be one of the worst loans you could offer. I mean, I know it's backed by the government, but in the idea that here we have someone who is not employed generally and has no collateral, are they even a good idea? So talk to me about your opinions on debt and the cause of tuition increase, and then also the status of is a student loan a good idea?
Well, you're hitting the nail on the head when you make the comments that you do. There are many, and perhaps even most, not-for-profit colleges where the degree pays for itself, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the availability of student lending has encouraged a lot of educational institutions to be opened where they are for-profit, where the graduation rates are very low, and where there's no demonstrated track record of you getting paid back, in essence, for your college education.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the first things you'd need to do from a reform standpoint is only make loans available for institutions where the hiring rate upon graduation, the graduation rate itself,
mm-hmm.
in effect, the payback equation is virtuous. The other thing that I would say, too, is not everybody has to go to a liberal arts school. There's a huge demand for a lot of jobs, whether they're in programming, whether they're in the trades,
yes.
Plumbing, electrician, and the like, where, in my opinion, student lending that would be productive should be offered and made available to those folks.
Yes.
That's a real opportunity. So I think kind of reforming the student loan picture would make a big difference.
Do you feel so do you feel we're hitting that maximum where people have taken on so much debt that without further credit expansion, it's kind of a tough thing because the Fed has rates about as low as you could take them, and they've changed their policy a little bit to say, hey, we're not going to be as aggressive in our easing. We're not going to print as much now. Low interest rates are what allow that to happen. They're about as low as you get. If we've already maxed out on debt, does that turn the economy now? If we've already got so much that people can't buy?
We are very truly approaching that level. There aren't many folks. When we stack all the countries in the world up against each other, we're at 160% household debt to GDP. There's not too many folks that have more than we do. Could ours go higher? Of course it could, and probably will. I mean, one of the facts that people don't focus on, and I think is at the heart of your comment, is debt, total debt, private and public debt, always grows as fast or faster than GDP. So in every country in the world, absent calamity such as a Great Depression, the debt to GDP ratio always gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that never stops. It might slow down for certain periods, but it never stops. And that's the dilemma my book addresses. It basically says, if it is true, which it is, that debt always grows faster than GDP, we are, in essence, predestined for calamity of some sort unless we intelligently, thoughtfully address better forms of debt relief. It's almost like a safety valve in an economy to make sure folks that are at the margin have, reasonable, thoughtful, fair, but widely available debt relief opportunities.
We're speaking with Richard Vague, and his book is called The Case for a Debt Jubilee. You can get this on Amazon.com. You can also get information about him at www.richardvague.com. It's an interesting conversation. Our show is about education. We are advocates of financial education. And my opinion is it might even be to the college level. I haven't been in college for a long time, but at least in the high school level, consumers, people, the electorate, the citizenry is not taught about money, which might be a big part of the big. It might, you can blame policy certainly, and have we made rates too low, or have we printed too much? Have we made debt too easy for them to entice them? Or we can say we've left them ignorant. I loved what you said about the paradox of debt. To me, it's a lot like when I teach my son about fire or about sex. They're very powerful and used properly. I said, son, when sex is used right, you're more like God than any other time. You're creating a human being, but if you abuse that, you're terrible. A fire can first thing you want to do in the mountains is know how to build a fire if it's cold, but it can burn your house down as well. So we haven't taught people to play with fire, essentially. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I love that thought. I'm currently served as Secretary of Banking and Securities for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and one of our great privileges in that, we examine and regulate banks and do all sorts of things that you would expect. But one of the privileges we have is doing financial education at multiple levels. We do that in high school. We do that for senior citizens. We do that for formerly incarcerated individuals who are trying to productively reenter the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a deeply gratifying thing. And it is amazing. I've been in financial services for 40 years. So things that, are second nature to me, it's amazing how many folks don't even know the rudimentary things. So surely it's important to do that sort of thing more broadly than we are today.
One of the reasons I recommend that people go and get books like yours is you never stop. It doesn't matter how long you've been out of high school or college. The landscape it's plastic. It changes. And I think one of the most important things I do each week is I try to learn. I try to find people like Richard who have vast experience and learn from what they know. Maybe give us a lesson here. Teach us a little bit about what is the Overton Window and why are politicians held captive by that?
Well, the Overton Window tries to define that part of the spectrum where two opposite sides of Congress or any body can come together and agree. So in this particular case, what's relevant is that the idea of just completely wiping out folks' debt is on one far end of the spectrum. The idea of, throwing folks in prison if they don't pay your debts is probably the other end of the spectrum. So where in the middle are productive ideas that both sides could agree on? And usually, by the way, as we all know, this is done reluctantly. The old
Sure.
saying is if both sides of an agreement are equally disgruntled, it's probably a good agreement. So,
Yeah.
So in this case, I didn't come in, as some folks have, and just say, this is a utopian vision. I said, what is it, given the problem, what is it that we can do that would realistically have a chance in Congress?
There's a degree of toughness. I don't know I'm kind of an old basketball player, and I had a bunch of tough coaches growing up, and so I'm a big believer in toughness. And when you have a problem, if you've run up some debt in your life, there's a degree of, you got to pay the piper. There's a tightening of the belt. I don't think we're very good at that. Any comments on that culturally in that, are we you mentioned that this isn't as bad, it wasn't as bad after World War II as it is now. Do we have less toughness to be able to solve these problems?
I'm not sure. I'm a student of history, as you know, and I examine these questions, be it in the 1700s or today. I think folks are pretty resilient. The issues we see, once you get into it, you see that a huge component of the debt problems we see today are from unexpected healthcare expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And healthcare just costs multiples of what it used to cost in our society. I mean, there's no comparison between, what we can do today to mitigate cancer or heart disease, but the cost is overwhelming.
Yes.
And so, what we see is that folks have what we call surprise medical bills, where they thought they were doing it, properly through their insurance network, but whoever they had to use at that particular moment was out of network, if you will.
Yep.
And so they have a $30,000 or $50,000 bill they never dreamed that they would have. So that's the single biggest factor in consumer debt problems that we have today, and that's one that could be solved by other means in terms of an improved healthcare system. But where we are today, that's just the fact. And a Fed survey recently showed that most folks, maybe even half, don't even have $400 extra to spend on an emergency.
Mm-hmm. Well, that could be true also in the public sector. Now that you mentioned the issue of healthcare, I know David Walker, the former comptroller of the United States, quit his job over that issue. He says, hey, this is a train wreck with so many promises that we can't keep even in Medicare, even in the public domain. So it hits both. Let's talk about this. What does alleviation of private debt look like?
You mean how much could we do?
Yeah. What if we could wave a magic wand and we could bring those two together, the politicians together? What does that deal look like?
The book is all about that, and I think there's a program on real estate where if your home is underwater, you could go to your lender and actually cede a portion on the eventual gain of the home in the future for a reduction in the principal balance of your mortgage today. And that would be at your option, not at the lender's option. So we have several programs that we've outlined. There's a similar concept that we put forward for small business owners, which, in my mind, a small business owner is more like a household than a major corporation. So I think, the small businesses are a virtuous part of our economy that we need to be thinking about as well. If you put the programs in place that I outline in my book, that could be a couple of $1 trillion in debt relief over a very short period of time. And if you saw that, what you would see is an economic boom. If folks are relieved of some meaningful portion of their debt, that means they're going to be a more vigorous participant in the economy. They're going to be sending their kids to good schools. They're going to be putting on good additions to their homes in terms of home improvement opportunities. So, we think it's a win-win. Folks have relief, the economy benefits.
I encourage everyone always to learn, and the case for a debt jubilee is a great place to learn. If someone says, well, I'm fine, I don't have a lot of debt. Well, I don't have a lot of debt, but the reason I care about books like this is my citizenry does. And as an investor, as an entrepreneur, I care about these issues because it certainly has an impact on the decisions that I have to make every single day. One of the things I love about you, Richard, and I caught this from our conversation when you were on the podcast before, is you don't talk and sound like a banker. A good case in point is you mentioned wanting to help people that have been incarcerated get a new start and wanting to assist people who have less money than you do. And so I appreciate your heart, and I appreciate you're such a gentleman to speak to. Any final words as we come into the new year? Words of counsel for our listeners, other than, go out and I'll take care of the go out and buy his book. What do you have to say to those guys moving into this new year?
Well, I think you put it beautifully when you said you don't have a debt problem, but it's important to the citizenry. I think we need to spend a little bit more time thinking about what our broad society needs and not what our individual needs are. And I think, frankly, if that happens, the benefit will come back to us. The stronger and healthier the society as a whole is, the better we all are going to be. So I think you put it well, and I would forcefully echo what you said.
Last time, the book is The Case for a Debt Jubilee. Go to Amazon.com, pick that up. You can also go to richardvague.com to learn more about Richard. This has been the Cash Flow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner. For more information on investing made easy, go to thecashflowacademy.com.